South Dakota public libraries are thriving despite funding concerns at the state and federal levels. Tonight, we're going to send things over to South Dakota News Watch reporter Bart Van Cook with the very latest.
Local libraries in South Dakota are thriving and evolving, even as they have faced the threat of state and local funding cuts, and as the South Dakota State Library in Pierre has been shuttered. Libraries in South Dakota have had a tough year on the political front, with deep cuts to the state library system proposed by former Governor Kristi Noem, a bill that would have made it a crime to lend some materials to children, and now an executive order from President Donald Trump that has slashed workers and funding to an agency that provides money and support to libraries across the country. Trump said cuts to the Institute for Museum and Library Services align with his efforts to reduce unnecessary bureaucracy. South Dakota lawmakers softened Noem's proposed cuts, but still cut funding and personnel at the state library, which limited public access this month. The failed bill to criminalize some librarian behavior was introduced over concerns that some librarians may provide inappropriate material to minors. Library supporters and officials in South Dakota have lobbied against the proposed cuts, arguing that libraries remain critical components of healthy communities. Funded largely by local taxpayers, most municipal libraries also rely on a hodgepodge of funding and donations to operate. Quote, "You can't balance the state or federal budget by cutting libraries," one librarian told Newswatch. Librarians in Redfield and Mitchell told Newswatch they're seeing growth in visitors and material lending. Both have expanded offerings to children and adults, creating new ways to promote reading and learning. In Redfield, children use Legos to learn construction, and in Mitchell, the library lends out board games and a telescope. Moving forward, librarians are waiting to see if more cuts will be proposed, and say they will adapt as necessary to continue to provide reading education for children and as many services as possible for their communities. For South Dakota News Watch, I'm Bart Van Cook.